This episode is sponsored by Lilly, a medicine company.
Hello and welcome to the Science of Skin podcast. My name is Dr. Ted Lain. I am a dermatologist in Austin and your host for today. But enough about me, because we have just an amazing guest, Dr. Scott Drew. Scott is the owner and the principal investigator at Dermatology Associates of Mid-Ohio, where he practices dermatology. He sees research patients. He's also heavily involved in the National Psoriasis Foundation, right, Scott? You're on the advisory board of that. Congratulations. He was recently introduced into the Noah Worcester Society, which is an amazing society for dermatologists, recognizing excellence in care and how much Scott has given to our specialty. So I am just so honored to have Scott on the podcast. And while, Scott, we could talk all about your clinical acumen and everything you have done for the specialty, both in terms of research and your contributions medically, what I'd like to focus on today is your philanthropy, if that's okay.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, Ted. Thanks for that great introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, if I also should say that Scott and I are friends, and so we may play around a little bit on the podcast just because we like each other immensely. Scott, so let's talk about Power of a Nickel and what it is and how you got started in it.
Sure. So Power of a Nickel is a 501c3 that was founded by a friend of mine, a fellow alum of my alma mater, who was dean of the Oklahoma State University School of Medicine, and one day called me and said, "Hey, have you ever been to Africa?" And he goes, "I'm running a medical trip there, and whenever we go, the biggest need we have is dermatologists, and we never have one, and we need one. Do you want to come?" And I thought, why in the world would I do that? And so he gave me some details, and I literally said, "Well, when is this trip planned for?" And he said, 2 weeks from Thursday. I went, "Oh." I asked my wife, and I said, "Well, let's go." So we went, and that was about 40 trips ago, and we've been going ever since. So, Power of a Nickel has a unique mission. It's threefold. It is to provide healthcare to the underserved. It is to bring U.S. medical students to the non-industrialized world, ostensibly to teach young up-and-comers that medicine is first eyes, ears, hands, and sometimes nose, before it's PET scans and CAT scans and point-of-service ultrasounds. And then thirdly, it is to give U.S. medical providers an opportunity to interface with providers in different places so we can exchange medical, intellectual, and cultural differences, because how we treat disease X here is different than how we treat it there, not only because medical knowledge, but also cultural issues and mores and just a whole different scenario. So this group, again, started over 40 years ago, and it brings dermatologists and other specialties, mainly other specialties, to every continent of the world except Antarctica. Yeah.
Wow. And so when you go, Scott, it sounds like you're with multiple other specialists that go, you're not on a derm only trip, you're with multiple other specialists.
So mostly, yes. So our group typically is a primary care group that has will augment with an orthopedic surgeon or an ENT surgeon or a dermatologist. But over the course of my career doing this, I have been on little subgroups where we have taken just derms or derms and ophthalmologists. But typically, it's a multi-specialty group. But why I like it so much is we have young people with us, like students and residents, and almost always, I would say 85% of the people that we see at least have one visit with derm, because it's, there's so many diseases that are mitigated by lack of education, lack of clean water, lack of, just some of the basic things we have. So derm is always the most popular place.
Scott, if a derm isn't interested in going and joining you on one of these
Mm.
trips, do they need to do like a tropical disease fellowship? Is there anything like
Ah,
extra education that they need?
so you have to educate your heart first, I would think. So it's
Okay.
funny you should say that, because when I first went, I thought I'd scour the medical literature. And so the front lecture slide I have when I give a lecture about this is a picture of the Sub-Saharan Africa dermatology textbook, which is 11 pages. So it doesn't take
Oh,
you long to become fully on board with that. So the answer is no. Uh, it, Really, you have to be open-minded and prepared. And I'll give an example of this, Ted. On the very
yeah.
first trip I went, we were given the pre-op work, that the biggest problem we had was itchy scalps, and everyone there has itchy scalps. And I thought, well, I'm brilliant, I'm fabulous, I can fix that problem. And I called my friends from the then company called Medicis, and I said, I need 1,000 little sachets of Najal shampoo. I got a bunch of people with Sebderm,
Yeah.
and off we went. And I get there, and I found out that water was a scarcity. They didn't have it was right on the Mara River, and if you kept water around, the mosquitoes would come and everyone would have malaria. So it was both a scarcity and a curse. And so rather than wash your hair with water, you'd wash it with mud.
Uh,
Mud. And to suggest that you wash it with water was a heresy, because you had to save clean water for feeding children and then make sure there's no extra water so you wouldn't get malaria. So all of a sudden I realized I was not as smart and brilliant as I thought I was. So it is the beauty of these projects is they're both individual health. Let me take care of the problem that you have, as well as public health problems, like there's no clean water, or when you
right.
wash your clothing, or wash, or I'll use clothing example. When you wash clothing, people tend to either lay it on a hedge or a tree, or on the ground, where ectoparasites then crawl onto this to the clothing, and then the person puts it on, and the next thing you know, they have babesiosis, and for which
Mm,
there is no readily available treatment, because they're busy worrying about food and water, not ectoparasites.
more pressing needs.
Yep.
Right.
So the quick answer to your question is no. You don't need really any preparation from a medical perspective. But what you do have to prepare for is the cultural change. And in our daily practices, we see the sign on the door, the chart on the door, and it says Mrs. Jones is in today for a rash on her torso, and you already start to think.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so I was in Malawi with four of my very dear friends who are all. This was a derm only trip, and we were sitting around at the end of the day comparing notes. And somebody said, "Oh, I saw this lady with this really terrible." Itchy rash on her torso. And I said, oh, I had a lady that was so dehydrated she was barely, and someone else had a lady with a rash on her neck. And we got to chatting, and we realized we had an epidemic of these dehydrated, demented, dying dermatitic patients who all had pellagra, which was
Oh
on
my gosh.
nobody's list, because we didn't see
Yeah.
pellagra. Well, it turns out all of the fish in Lake Malawi have schisto, and all the cows have brucella. So nobody eats fish or meat; they all eat rice, corn, and paint chips. And so, you know, the
Sugar
public health
deficiency.
cure is,
Yeah.
let's bring a bowl of Wheaties once a month, and you're
Right.
fine. But again, so you just have to be open-minded, and it's fun to have these little mini grand rounds. Now, having said that, we see a lot of acne, psoriasis, eczema, the normal stuff as well. But you also
Yeah.
see some things that you would not even be in your differential, in North America.
I can imagine people listening to this would be interested in joining and can see the benefit professionally, personally, just for your soul as well. What's it like when you join a trip like this? I know
Mm.
there's some payment involved, right? Like you have to pay your way to do
Yep.
this.
Mm.
It's not supported in any
Yep.
other way.
So right, we're pretty happy that we don't take any money from the government. We're pretty pleased by that. This is all self-funded, and the good news is, and our medical students, they either can do it curricularly, like through their school, and then bundle it through through their student aid.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people that go are like my age and older, and so we have a
Mhm.
little foundation that helps that kind of thing as well. There's really no uh, requirement like sweat equity or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, and we encourage people like to look at our website, powerofanickel.org. But
Okay.
we do usually have, people typically don't say, let's go in a week. They think, oh, it's not like let's go to Boston or let's go to Ireland. You
Right.
got to get a yellow fever shot, etc. So we talk
Yeah.
about having 3 or 4 hour and a half webinars with the whole group. So everybody kind of knows everybody's face, that kind of thing. We talk about some custom things, like it's a good idea if you're going to a third world or a non-industrialized country to not have a T-shirt that says, "Wow, the Philadelphia Eagles are the best," and "Boy, we're the
Yeah.
best people in the world." That kind of thing. Have unbranded stuff.
Yeah.
We talk about like uh, the biggest question we get. The first question is always safety. Is it safe to go there? And I live in a small town in Ohio, and I tell people I feel safer in Uganda than I do in some places in my little town.
Okay.
So we talk about safety. We talk about the group, just like if you're going scuba diving. You got to have a buddy. Don't just wander around, by yourself. We talk about what volunteer sort of supplies one can bring, and again, a little about just the cultural mores. For example, there are very little medical records that a hospital keeps, and many patients have never seen a doctor, never. So, like, a patient walks into a room in Austin, Texas, or in Marion, Ohio. You say, "Hi, what can I do for you?" And they say, "Oh, my left foot hurts," or "I have an itchy rash on my left ear." And there, people just don't have any idea what you can do for them, and they don't understand the dynamic of what a doctor visit's like. And you say, what medicines have you used? Well, a leaf of that tree or the salve that my grandmother made, or so it's a whole different thing, and it requires a lot of listening. And
Yeah.
we always partner with local in-country healthcare providers because they
Okay.
just do things differently than we do, and we have to listen to them because for example, in the Kipsigis tribe in Kenya, your scalp hair, is part of your marital gift to your spouse. So you would no more show your scalp to a stranger than you would walk in naked to your son's baseball game. Like, it's just not a
Mhm.
thing. Well, of course, you don't know that until Scotty Drew walks in and says, "Oh, what's wrong with their hair?" and rips the hat off, right? And so
Oh gosh.
you have to have someone help guide you through this process. So
Okay.
it's quite educational for you individually to see how different things are done, because we think, oh, you've got psoriasis. What's your BSA? Do you have any joint pain? How are we going to approach the way we're going to holistically attack this systemic problem? And that's not the way everyone thinks about healthcare. Not to mention the resources you and I have um, are just logarithmically more than what many people have. I'll give you an example. We were in Uganda at a rural clinic where they thought there was an epidemic of some MRSA type of infection that all these kids were getting. Yet when you walked in the room, you saw all these bullish kids sitting on mom's lap, and no one else had this rash except these like 20 kids. And I think most first year derm residents would have recognized linear IgA bullous dermatosis pretty quickly. And having been on a myriad of antibiotics, but that they had indigenously and were imported in from other places. And so we said, well, it's going to be pretty easy. You and I would do a DIF and an H&E, and then we'd do a G6PD, and then off would be. Well, not only is there no needle to numb a biopsy site,
Mhm.
there's no three punch, there's no formalin, there's nobody to read the slide, there's no blood test for the G6PD, and by the way, there's no dapsone. So, like, okay, what are we going to do? And the beauty
Yeah.
of the organization is when you get there, our organization takes care of the licensing. So you have a license to practice in Malawi, Uganda, Syria, where we happen to be. And then the Department of Tourism and Health sends an attaché, so you always have someone there. And after about 2 days, we had a little mini lab, and we had G6PDs. And by the time we left, everybody that could be on DAPS, because who is G6PD deficient? But a bunch of young type 5, type 6 Fitzpatrick kids. So
Right.
all of a sudden, we have the things that are now available to us, which makes me extrapolate. The first time, my very first trip to Kenya, we walked into the lab, and they had a finger stick, and they had three things. They had a hemoglobin, they had a Brucella titer, and an HIV titer. Not Brucella, I'm sorry, typhus. HIV, hematocrit, and typhus was all they had. And I had to stop and look up typhus. I said, is that typhoid? No, that's not. That's separate. What? And I thought, typhus? And in my lecture, one of my introductory lectures, I have a picture of like 6 kids, and they're all running around the playground with IVs in their head, getting medicine for their typhus. I thought, what? Just crazy.
Crazy. Yeah. It really makes you think about the entire breadth of your dermatology knowledge. I think in clinic, a lot of us see, the zebras every once in a while, but otherwise we're pretty much on the straight and narrow in what we see.
Right. What's crazy, Ted, in sub-Saharan Africa, the pediatric transmission of HIV is like next to zero. PEPFAR has ensured that you can be in the deepest, darkest part of Africa, and the drone will still drop off heart therapy. However, adult transmission of HIV is still pretty significant. Upwards of 30% in some places. And so say you're below the equator, so your risk of HIV is about 30%. Your risk of malaria is about 99%, and your risk of tuberculosis is about 60%. And 3 million people die every year of syphilis. So how about you have psoriasis? Because, 3, 4, 5% of people have psoriasis, and you've got all those other comorbidities. So you don't have a single functioning T cell. So what normally you and I would think of what psoriasis looks like, big, thick plaques on the elbows, knees, scalp, maybe inverse, none of that applies. You've got some other manifestations, typically, which is represented by what these not functioning T cells look like or present. Like, could that be psoriasis? Well, there's no lab. You can't biopsy that. You just have to. Right. And then if you do treat it and they do have TB, or they do have malaria or Hep C or whatever else, you're not going to give them the things that we have if you could get them. And so I write when I'm there, and people are, once you get their malaria under control, and I'm serious, malaria, 100% of people have malaria. And so once you get all those things under control and you're ready to start psoriasis therapy, I write more methotrexate there, and when I'm there for a week, than I write in 5 years back in the States.
And then someone will take over care? Is that the idea?
Yes. We haven't talked about that yet. So, I sometimes struggle with this because there is absolute value, in my opinion, in the relief of human suffering. The story, I have a patient that I saw in Nicaragua who had this giant squame. Anyone see my lecture, see this picture? It's like this big on his chest, and he was told to come back, go to the local clinic, and they get an appointment in a year. And so we scrambled together and took care of this thing, and it was quite an ordeal, and he was fine. And that's good. And we impacted this guy's life. But is that worth bringing 30 people? Where do you make that balance? So right. I would have to say one thing I'm proud of is we really never go anywhere, A, where we're not invited, and B, we have the opportunity to do some sort of continuity of care metric. So when a derm comes, or an internist or a pediatrician or whomever, like we do partner with Geisinger. They bring a pediatric residency group with them every year. And we partner with Michigan State and WVSOM, and they bring cohorts of people. So everybody signs up to do a Zoom shift, if you will. And then part of working with indigenous healthcare providers is that, most of them are left with a pretty robust dose of Scott Drew teaching, which is sometimes like a big fire hose, and then with the benefit of WhatsApp, I got a text last night, which I'm pretty sure was just garden variety nummular eczema, but my differential was, oh, do they have syphilis? Do they have da, 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 da. So we like to provide some continuity of care, and the establishment of not EMR, just MR. And what's interesting is the medical records are the property of the patient. And so the patient keeps it. And it has become a sort of social stratification. I have been to the doctor. And we kind of laugh because, in this day and age of physician rating and keeping patients happy, can you imagine telling your patient, bring your records back and forth all the time? They can't remember what dose of medicine they're on, much less bring your records back and forth with. So we like to think that we are providing some degree of teaching both to the patient and to the community which we're serving, so that we can go back. And Ted, I'll tell you, the first time I went to Kenya, we practiced in a tent. And that was, I can't remember how long ago that was. And now, and this again started with a pharmaceutical company, Medicis, way back when. Now we have like 8 buildings, and you can actually deliver a baby. You can have your gallbladder out. You can have many surgical procedures done there. And there's also now a school where you can become a nurse, a teacher, a hotel person, that keeps the village populated with its best and brightest. Because like in Masaka, in Narok, Kenya, if you want to become a doctor or a nurse, you have to go to Nairobi. And then when you get done, you get back to Narok, where there's nothing but a wooden mall of stores. No, you've probably met someone. You're gonna stay in Nairobi, and all of a sudden, Narok is no better off having sent you there. So we like to be able to make the village have at least a micro economy, if not an economy, so that people can get not have to take a ox and cart 7 hours into a major hub to get healthcare.
This episode is sponsored by Lilly, a medicine company.
When, Scott, and again, remedial questions for me, but when physicians, you bring this group, what are the living quarters like for them?
Okay. So no one trip is the same. So if we go to Peru, it's a 5-hour flight from Atlanta, no time change. So you go and you take a week off of work, and there's no jet lag, and it's like a week. And you stay at a DoubleTree, and you go to a little clinic on the shores of the Amazon, and the people come in by boat from a village. And when the evening's over, you go back to the DoubleTree, you go get a massage at the spa, and life is great. When you go to Malawi, it's not the same. Now we do have people that scout, and we have, like, I've done many R&R trips to go and see, like just 3 or 4 of us will go and see if it's sustainable, because we have to have proper transportation, safe food, safe lodging. We always have armed security guards. It was kind of weird. The first time I went, the guy opened my soda with the tip of his AK-47. I was like, okay, that's a little different. When we go to Thintran out of Harvard, invited me many, many years ago to go with her to her laser clinic in Vietnam. And there, Ted, it's so sad. There's a pretty high proportion of kids with vascular malformations of the face, and higher than Cambodia or Laos or Myanmar, but nobody seems to know why. Well, it turns out that the parents take their kids to the local shaman and put them in the warm water bubbling hot springs to soothe them. Well, it turns out they're tritiated phosphorus, P32, and a third of the kids die of lymphocytic malignancies. So what we do is we try to convince them, don't just walk 10 feet to your local hot pot, walk 7 hours to our laser clinic where we can blast the heck out of your face where it hurts like crazy, and do it every month and have to walk forever. It's quite something. But
Yeah.
when you go there, we stay in Saigon, which is a city of, I don't know, 20 million people. And we stay in a high rise, and you can eat sushi all day, and it's like a vacation. And then every day you take a bus 40 minutes out of the ring road to a village would be an upgrade. And but I tell you, the people are thrilled to see you. What's fascinating, my wife happens to be blonde, and we always have a few people in the trip who are blonde, and indigenous people will come up and like touch their hair. They've never seen a color like that before. And these are people who don't have the internet, right? So it's like very, very, very different. And and it is just a cultural awakening. I don't think we've ever had accommodations that weren't good. We've had 1 stars. The more rural you are, the more likely you are seeing some really weird stuff. The
And
more likely you are
likely
not
it
to
is.
have a fillet the night that you eat.
Right.
And so in Peru, we eat well. We had a clinic at the Syrian Turkish border during the diaspora of Syrians in the war, just 5-6 years ago. And we had a lot of box lunches there. I always tell people to bring enough calories to get you through a meal. So one time, some young medical student brought tuna packets with him, which was a very bad idea. I'm like, no, bring Pop-Tarts or M&Ms. Don't bring tuna fish. But we go out of our way to make sure that people their needs are met. But Ted, we have to be honest and graphic with people. When you're in Uganda, there's no running water, there's no plumbing to the places we go. We may get there at 8 a.m. and not leave till 5 p.m. So we tell people very candidly, take care of all your personal needs before you leave the hotel, because the last thing you want to do is be in an outhouse where there is no water, no soap, no paper, no nothing. And so these trips are not for the faint of heart. But I also think if you can get through residency and med school and pass the derm boards, it's doable.
Gotcha. One more question, Scott, about the supplies, because I may have missed this. Are there people that go responsible for bringing their own supplies?
No. We provide everything. The only what you have to do is, and this is kind of funny. Most people end up leaving much of what they bring there. I probably have, I don't know, 100 pair of scrubs, and whenever I go, I leave them because people are there. I went to a little boy who was there. We were in Malawi, and he had a Michael Jordan shirt on. I'm like, oh, do you like Michael Jordan? And he's like, who's Michael Jordan? I'm like, well, the shirt you have on. And so every T-shirt that says Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl champion 2025, because they didn't win, all those shirts go to Africa. And so for them, it's warm clothing, or nice, So we've been around long enough that we have enough money to buy medicines. Now, not biologics and not Jacks, but medicines. And we have gauze, we have surgical supplies, we have injectables, we have syringes, we have it's funny. We learned on my first trip back, I had co-opted my derm path to read my biopsies. And when I got to customs, they want to know why I had 50 jars of human flesh coming back into the country, right? Like, you can imagine that conversation.
Yeah.
So we now have all the paperwork that's assigned, and when you get there, that you're welcomed like royalty. And so you don't now. I will say we bring like our radiologist brings. This is maybe different than when you and I were in medical school, Ted. These kids come now; they get these little pocket held ultrasounds in their when they're in first year of medical school, and you and I might not ever cut off a midline cyst. Well, these kids, they whip out the ultrasound and they wave it around, and they said, "Well, see, Dr. Joe," I'm like, "I don't know what I'm looking at," and they said, "Well, there's no connection between the core," and I'm like, "Oh, I have no idea." So some specialists bring nuanced things, and we typically ask people if they're in derm, "Oh, if you can bring a case of Cetaphil or a case of CeraVe or a case of Neutrogena, because cleansers and moisturizers." I mean, everybody's got atopic dermatitis because nobody has any red vegetables or green vegetables or yellow vegetables in their diet. Everyone's got malnourishment. So whatever you can do to get that skin barrier back to where it's supposed to be. But in terms of asking people to fund the mission, I would say no. Let me say, this is, again, sort of a weird nuance. I don't make people not say it, but sometimes if you use the word mission, it tends to denote a religious connotation to it. And we welcome any religion. I don't care what. And I don't want to think that if someone is not participating in a particular religion, they're not welcome. We take all comers. And now I will say, in Africa, you will go to places where 100% of people are in a certain religion. If you're going now, we don't ever go to Mozambique, but if you go to a place, you're pretty sure it's the people there are going to be of one particular sect or faith culture. But we never go any place where we're not invited, and we never bring 50 people to a place where a team of 4 or 5 have not been to see what's going on. And we in derm, particularly in the past 10, 15 years, like to remind us that so many of our diseases are multi-system. We used to think of psoriasis as a skin disease, and now we know, or AD is a better example. It's a so we like to have our trips with at least some input to other disease states. And when we think of chlamydia here, we think of that's our disease. But over there, it's an ophthalmologic disease. And when's the last time you and I ever thought of chlamydia in the eye? That's just but that's not the way it is there. So so the supply is a good idea. But I will also tell you, there's some things that people really feel good about donating time and stuff. So little things like stickers. So if we're going to deworm a community and you got 4,000 little kids, you gotta keep the wormed kids separate from the dewormed kids. And that's going to 4-year-olds to stay in line. Good luck with that. So nurses will bring stickers once you get your worming medicine, you get a sticker. So if a kid's got a sticker, you don't give them more worm medicine. So all sorts of little
tricks of the trade.
Yes, and inexpensive stuff. Yeah. But the organization's been around long enough where we have a bench of medicine. We actually have a warehouse now. And once you've had our recidivism rate is about 0. So everybody who goes, even if they can't go back again, they donate, they send a friend. And even if you're not in healthcare, we bring engineers because, if you're in a community that's impoverished, you dig a well. Once you get a well, then you can throw a plant. And once you get enough food, you can get a cow. And once you get a cow, you get a pig. And then all of a sudden you have a microeconomy and you start a microbank. So we try to bring a diverse group of people. And every now and then it's pretty helpful when you have a group of dermatologists who are never shy on ego, get an earful from the local engineer, the teacher, or even the lawyer. Like, oh, yeah, we could do that. So it really is a multidisciplinary, multi-team approach to the problem.
Scott, thank you so much. I mean, I've had all these questions after I've known what you've been doing for a while, but I've always had these questions. I could have just asked you, I suppose, but this is a great way for not only me to learn more about it as I consider joining, but also for many others. And obviously what you do is so important and so necessary around the world. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for sharing with us. I think this is really an incredible initiative that you started many years ago. And the organization sounds like it's flourishing and helping so many people.
Well, so we have a couple fun things coming up. Thin, Tron, and I are going back to Uganda, going back to Vietnam in January. And then with Michigan State,
2026, January 2026.
Yep. I'm sorry, 26. Jody Flanders and I are leading a team to Peru in March of 26. And then Tom Sarah and I are doing a trip to Uganda, July 16th. And then we are still working out the details of Kenya in November of 26. And then, but our group, they run a trip every month somewhere. I don't know all of it, but and we always welcome new places, but we kind of like going to old places. I like continuity of care. I like seeing the same doctors and nurses and patients over time. Powerofanickel.org is our website, and I've never had someone say to me, "Wow, I wish I hadn't done that." Everybody enjoys that opportunity.
Perfect. Well, you've been listening to the Science of Skin podcast. My name is Dr. Ted Lain. I'm your host. Of course, our wonderful guest has been Dr. Scott Drew. He's a dermatologist in Ohio and obviously a leader in philanthropy and dermatology as well. Dr. Drew, again, thank you so much for being with us. If you like today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating. Give us subscribe as well. Let your friends know that we found that our podcast is growing because of word of mouth. So if you could let your colleagues know, you get to hear this great content like we had today from Dr. Drew. Thank you again for listening, and have a great Thanksgiving, wonderful Christmas, and of course, I hope your 2026 is amazing as well. Take care.
This episode is sponsored by Lilly, a medicine company.